I've got a brother who just moved to Italy to work and live there, and we did a price comparison the other day. We have a bit of a chat about this quite often, the cost of living in Italy versus Australia. And bearing in mind that a lot of Italians moved to Australia many years ago for a better life. Now you wonder whether there's going to be a move back, an exodus. Almost everything is cheaper in Italy, from a block of cheese to breakfast at the local cafe, to a toothbrush, a loaf of bread, your phone bill, your internet bills, much lower. Comparative rents for property, housing prices, a bottle of wine, a beer, even a beer, much cheaper. The only thing which is cheaper here, which we could agree on, was the price of petrol. Now to the supermarkets inquiries, the plethora of inquiries into Australia's supermarket duopoly. Yes, Coles and Woolies are expensive, there is no doubt. Yes, Australia is one of the most expensive countries in the world, almost bar none, and a terrific destination for foreign investors. As a reason for that, we'll show you why in a tick, because Australia is a nation of duopolies and oligopolies and monopolies. The recent stagnant wages data out of the ABS was a reminder that the buying power of ordinary Australians has not matched rising prices over the years, made a lot worse since the spike of inflation, which began globally when the coalition was in power. The Green Senator Nick McKim established in a fiery Senate hearing with the Woolies chief executive Brad Banducci that the profit margins of the supermarkets were lavish. They were high. There was an argument over which measure to use. And Banducci stonewalled because he knows with his $8 million salary, he's on a good kick. The fact is the profit margins in Australian supermarkets are higher than in other countries. Is this just the market? Well, yes, it is. There's been pushback from the ASX, from share market type people saying, well, this is just people, a couple of big supermarket chains competing and they're not that big, the margins. Well, they're not that big, the margins, compared to, say, Google or something like that, because supermarkets are high volume, high turnover, low profit beasts. That is their nature. But food is an essential commodity. You've got to eat even before you need a roof over your head. So this is a situation brought about by successive government policy, allowing this duopoly to get 60 or 70% of the grocery market. Competition policy is critical, therefore, to Australians. The ACCC, the competition regulator, has challenges set out for it all over the place. People flock to Indonesia to live there, in another country, because Australia's too expensive. Tent cities popping up in parks. But is all this enough to force a bust-up, a divestiture of the supermarkets? Well, the politics has been absolutely frantic. First of all, earlier this year, Albo set up an industry code of practice. We know those don't work, codes of practices. Nick McKim, Green Senator, set up a Senate inquiry, which he chaired, out of which he developed a private members bill that contained wide-ranging breakup powers if Woolies and Coles misbehaved. The Nats, the Nationals, were in favour, but then they switched because they didn't want the Greens to get the glory. Sure enough, on June 26th, the coalition joined with Labor in the Senate to knock off McKim's bill. Then, just 6 days later, Peter Dutton, David Littleproud and Shadow Treasurer Angus announced that the Nationals leader would himself introduce a private members bill that threatened the big supermarkets with a bust-up if they did not behave. Good to have this hanging over their heads. Craig Emerson, meanwhile, the Labor-appointed economist, came out, he headed an inquiry of his own, came out with a report junking the idea of forced divestiture, of breakup, and meanwhile the ACCC is doing its own investigation, which is good. That's what they should be doing. Should be the independent regulator. Further to Emerson's findings, each of the last 3 big reviews of competition law in Australia, 1993 Hilmer, 2009 Dawson and 2015 Harper, they love their inquiries, and they love their recommendations, and none are ever taken up. They rejected increased divestiture powers being introduced. I think we need this hanging over the heads of all monopolies and duopolies. Frankly, whether it happens well, snowflakes chance there, but it needs to be there. It's a radical move, but bust-ups has never been done in this country. And we've got donors, of course, and lobbyists for these big companies, which will prevent it happening. It was last done in the US. The baby bells, the breakup of the telco monopoly there. Also, no one from the Greens, the Liberals or the Nationals has yet said what the Treasury advised in its briefing note on 15 April, that the last successful divestiture case in the US was 1982 and in the UK 2009. Hard yakka, busting up large, powerful, influential corporations who pay the piper, their political donations to both major parties. So it's not likely to happen anytime soon, and the cost of living crisis is now. That's disappointing. But these inquiries, this is the politicians doing their job. They have an impact of waving the finger at the supermarket boards and supermarket chiefs to say, just don't push your profit margins too high. So they do have a benefit. The other thing is that the supply chain during COVID, foreign importers like Unilever, who the consumer products group giant, their costs just went through the roof, their shipping costs because of COVID. And they haven't passed on their fat margins since. So they've kept the margins. So Coles and Woolies, don't want to sing their songbook too loudly, but they are getting squeezed at that end as well from the consumer groups that have been squeezed by the supermarkets for so long. Price pressure in the system. Problem is that Australia is a nation of duopolies, and it costs us all one of the most expensive countries in the world. Now check out this chart. That's us, way out there on the right scale with far higher market concentration, and therefore less competition. Fewer players means less competition. And that's why it was bizarre that Jim Chalmers has just passed the Suncorp merger or Suncorp takeover by ANZ. How can you possibly have more competition with less players, with fewer players rather? When you look at the net profit margins for big companies, which is the vertical axis, we, Australia, romp in at number 3 in the world. On a monopolies basis, we're a clear number 1. So it is. We, the consumers, all pay through the nose. And who are the winners? The foreigners and the investors. It's a paradise for investors, Australia, and the housing situation bears that out. If you look at the other chart here, that's Australia in the blue. For investors, the nips keep on getting bigger. That's Australia in the blue. Superb returns for foreign investors. Look at these investment returns. That's what a couple of decades of government policy skewed towards the interests of the haves over the have-nots will do, of policy settings appeasing large corporations over people, wealthy retirees over younger workers, corporations over people. Australia's a great country for foreign investors. There it is in the charts, and these numbers do not lie. The ACCC needs greater powers. Please like, share, comment in the section below.